We've all heard about black-eyed children lore, but a woman emailed and said that her daughter was born a black-eyed child and she thinks it was partially her fault. This is Spooky Scary Story Time, the series where I share allegedly true stories from listeners about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that they think nobody else would believe. And I haven't shared a really creepy story in a while, but this one got me. So this came from a woman named Michelle. She said that years ago she was living with her boyfriend and her firstborn son in Florida. Her cousin Robbie needed a place to stay, so he calls her up. He's like, hey, can I come crash with you for a few weeks while I get on my feet? She's like, sure, no problem. Her and Robbie were really close. They had always had a good relationship. So he moves in. One day her boyfriend's at work. They're kind of just sitting around the house bored. Robbie goes, do you want to play with a Ouija board? She was like, I don't know about that. She said at the time she was really religious. She had a strong belief in God and she just didn't think that you should be messing with those things. But Robbie convinces her. He's like, probably nothing's going to happen. She's like, you're probably right. Nothing's going to happen. So they make a board out of a cardboard box and they use a CD for a planchette. They start playing with the board. In typical fashion, Robbie assumes that she's moving the planchette. She assumes that Robbie's moving the planchette. Then the board starts answering questions that Robbie doesn't know the answer to, and she's like, maybe my subconscious is just moving it, right? Then a pair of closet doors flings open. They're like, oh, it must have been a creak in the house. Then it starts quoting scripture. Then it tells her that she's pregnant and that she's pregnant with a girl. She said, once it said that, it scared me to my core. We threw the board away. She said, I don't know if it was Robbie, but I just didn't want to mess with it anymore. They throw it away. The next day, it's back on the table. She asked Robbie. Robbie's like, I didn't bring it in. Did you bring it in? She's like, no. Still assuming it must be Robbie. So they tore it up, threw it in the dumpster behind the apartment complex. The next day, it's pieced together back on the table. Bent in the places where she had ripped it up. She's still convinced it's Robbie. Robbie's convinced it's her. And she said 20 years later, they still question each other about who put it back on the table. She's like, I'm done with this. She ends up burning the board and then it was gone for good. But she said after that, she felt like there was this presence with her, like something just looking over her shoulder all the time. She said she became super anxious. She was convinced that her boyfriend was trying to her, which is weird because they didn't have any problems leading up till that point. Crippling anxiety, crippling like fear of things that really seem nonsensical at the point. Robbie ended up finding a place. He packed up and moved out. After Robbie moved out, Michelle said she started having these horrible nightmares, and she went into very graphic detail about what she dreamed about. Use your imagination. I'm not going to scar you with any of it, but just horrible things that nobody should be thinking about or dreaming about. Said she became convinced, like she almost thought she was having like some sort of psychosis. She became convinced that this like spirit or whatever she felt like latched onto her back was showing her all of the evil in the world. Said, I know it sounds crazy, but there was really nothing else bad going on in my life at the time, and it just felt like this overwhelming sense of fear that fueled every second of my life. So she said, desperate to overcome this thing that was attached to her, she picked up a Bible and attempted to read it, but all of a sudden it was like she couldn't recognize the words on the page. She said, looking at the Bible, it looked like words were ants on the paper, and she couldn't remember the words God or Jesus, and she knew that if she could ask for help, she could be saved, but she couldn't find the words to do it. It was like her brain was on ADHD overdrive. She starts crying. She starts having visions of like mass destruction. Everything is insane. And then she said, she just finally said, God save me, and she felt this overwhelming sense of peace, and everything seemed like it was back to normal. She still doesn't watch scary movies because she's convinced that whatever this thing was is trying to come back to her through scary movies. But anyway, she says about a week after she asked God to save her, she takes a pregnancy test and she's pregnant. She finds out later it's a girl. She says after her daughter was born, she would notice moments where her daughter's eyes would seemingly turn black as a newborn and then into toddlerhood. She says as a toddler, her daughter would creep her out in a way that her first child didn't creep her out. One night she would wake up to find her little toddler daughter standing next to her bed, just staring at her in the darkness. She said her eyes still changed black and sometimes her voice changed too. There were just periods where it felt like it wasn't even her daughter in the body. And even when she wasn't around her daughter, she could tell and she could feel when her daughter changed. She hadn't experienced anything like this with her son, and she was just like, maybe it's just a different little kid thing, a little girl thing. She talked to other parents about it. The other parents agreed. They're like, haha, yeah, sometimes kids could be creepy. And she was like, yeah, but do their eyes ever change? Like, do their voices ever change? And the parents were just like, oh, she's just a little girl. When her daughter was 3, she was kind of going through a rough time in her life, and her cousin offered to watch her daughter because she was like, you should get out, you should go on a date. I got her. And Michelle was like, I don't know, she can be really creepy sometimes. Cousin, not knowing the extent of it, is like, no, all kids can be creepy sometimes. And Michelle's like, no, she can be really creepy. And her cousin's like, please, you need to get out, you need to go on a date. So she goes reluctantly, and when she got home that night, she realized that her cousin's 4 kids and their dog were all locked in a room without the daughter. Her daughter's asleep in another room. She asked what happened. Her cousin's like, her eyes changed to black and her voice changed, and she scared us all so bad that we locked ourselves in the room and started to pray. Michelle says when she got her daughter that night, she was completely normal. And Michelle's daughter was 5. Michelle gave birth to a 3rd baby, and one of the child's aunts came to help out with the new baby. Michelle's up with the baby one night. The baby had been crying. Her daughter wakes up, apparently goes into the aunt's room and starts talking to her in this deep, creepy voice. Aunt comes running out, tells her what's going on. She's like, I don't know what is in her body, but that doesn't seem or sound like your daughter. Michelle says, yeah, she does that. She can just be a little bit creepy sometimes. And so her aunt reluctantly goes in the room and tries to calm the daughter down, but the daughter gets worse and worse. She can hear her screaming in the other room, but she said she was nursing the baby. There wasn't really much she could do to intervene. She figured the aunt had it handled. A minute or two later, the aunt comes back in the room. She said, "That is not your daughter. I'm convinced of it." She locks the door behind her. The second she locks the door, the little girl starts banging and screaming a very non-human scream on the other side of the door. She said the look of terror on her aunt's face was just something that she had never seen before, and they waited a few minutes for the banging and the screaming to stop. They opened the door and they saw the little girl standing in the hallway. She looked at them and then turned and went to bed. That all of the screaming, all of the eye changing, all of the voice changing stopped when her daughter was 7, and she never had another issue. She said up to that point and afterward, her daughter has always been a very sweet girl except for those moments. And she's really just curious if anyone's ever had a similar experience, and if you think it was related to the Ouija board or something else. Is this just a thing that kids do? That she's 18 now, she's doing well. She's never had an imaginary friend, never complained about strange dreams or anything like creepy like that. It was just these moments of this strange behavior that really sent her over the edge. Let her know what you think. If you have a story you think nobody else would believe, let me know your thoughts.
I need to tell you guys this ghost story. When I was around 6 years old, my parents bought a house that was definitely haunted. Of course they did. Why are parents doing that? Why parents collectively? Why are we buying haunted houses and forcing our children to live in them? I began seeing figures wandering the hall at night and peering into my room. I would tell my mom about this and would get the "it's only your imagination" response. Oh my God. The house had a basement that I wasn't very fond of. I always felt as though I was being watched when I went down there. I had a playroom down there. Why? Why was your playroom in the creepy basement? I had a playroom down there that I would go to occasionally to play with some of my older toys. One day when I was in my early teens, I went to my old playroom to look for something. I don't trust where the story is going. I don't know where it's going, but I don't trust it. I had just found what I was looking for when I heard my mom call me from the laundry room, which was located deeper into the basement. I was about to answer her when I remembered that my mom wasn't even home. As someone who has had this happen, I can only imagine how terrified you must have been when you realized, hey, she's not home. Next one says, I worked at a prison that was an old psych asylum. Of course you do. No, yeah, I worked at a prison that was an old psych asylum that opened in 1894. I've never seen anything, but heard things. I do remember sitting in my office one night. All inmates were asleep. I heard some chaos, like a bunch of voices, just like people talking over each other, almost like a school cafeteria. I shot up from my chair and went into the hall, and there was complete silence. This just reminded me of something that my parents went through. I'll have to do a separate video on that, but the place was definitely eerie and beyond creepy. The basement was my least favorite place to go. It connected to the prison next door, too. When I would go down there, it felt like you were being weighed down and couldn't breathe normal. The air just felt so heavy. Almost all old asylums have reputations for being terrible places, so I can imagine that the energy in there feels really heavy. Some correctional officers would tell me their experience, and some would laugh and say how ghosts don't exist. I've had guys tell me stories about going down to hang out in the gym office during the night. They would hear sneakers screeching like guys were playing basketball, only to see that no one else was there. One guy said how he was sleeping in a closed-off section and woke up to the sensation of being choked by something or someone. Next one says, when I was in the 5th grade, I'd had my first paranormal experience, along with many of my classmates. Our school was known to be haunted for whatever reason, as well as the high school and middle schools. There was a tornado in my city in 1991 before I was born, and it was rumored that the bodies were buried all over the city. I was enrolled in the elementary school because I had moved. My first day was kind of rough. I could tell that I probably wouldn't fit in, but I made some great friends. I tried that, I saw a hack here where you did your rollers and then you would use the shark and you would put it in the rollers to heat them up to get like a really good blowout. I'd say it worked, and I'd say it worked really well. This looks insane. It looks so good. Are we joking? Look at this. Stop. One day we were all on the playground and one of the students in my class named Kyle saw a person wandering around in the woods. He told the teacher, but she didn't believe him. So he started telling everyone of our classmates, including myself, that he saw somebody in the woods. The teacher finally believed him. The look on her face, you could tell that she saw something that wasn't human. We weren't allowed on the playground for a couple of days after that happened for our safety, so we would have recess in the lunchroom. During recess time, this girl named Serena walked up to me and asked me if we had saw the person in the woods. I said no. The teacher was trying to get us all in as fast as she could, so I didn't really have time to look. After that, she sat me down and showed me a locket. I didn't really know why she was showing me a locket and how it would somehow possibly be connected to the conversation until she told me that she knew the person outside and that the person gave her that locket. Oh no. A few days after Serena had shown me the locket, we were finally allowed to go outside for recess. Here comes Serena with the locket in her hand. In the locket was a picture of the girl that Kyle saw. Fast forward to a few months later, all of my classmates are participating in a musical at the high school. We all sit behind the curtain waiting for our turn in the musical. Serena, myself, and some others were left behind. And for some reason, there's a staircase behind the curtain that leads up to a door. And as we're about to go on stage for our role, we see the same girl going up the staircase and disappear. No.
Let's read some more scary stories that were sent to us. When I was about 18, I was downstairs hanging out with my cousin, and my mom was upstairs in her bedroom with her boyfriend at the time. I walked over to the bottom of the stairs, and when I looked up, there was a face leaning over the railing just looking at me. I screamed and thought maybe it was my mom, but she swears it wasn't her. Later on, I lived in an old apartment building that used to have a doctor's office on the main level, and I actually lived on the main level. I lived there for about 2 years, and once I got off birth control to try and have a baby, I didn't get my period for 8 months. My fiance and I were in the process of moving out, and I had a door in the apartment open that led directly outside, so we had that open. When you look into the apartment, it's a long hallway. When I looked into my apartment, I saw a little boy on his hands and knees in my bedroom, peeking out from around the corner. I screamed, and nobody had gone into the apartment, so we were all kind of freaked out. So I'm living in my new place for about 3 weeks at this point, and I got my period for the first time in months. Then I decided to look up pictures of the old building, and there was an old picture with a bunch of people in the yard, and the only person looking at the camera was a little boy who looked identical to the one I saw in my old apartment. Okay, I feel like it's not a coincidence that the time that she lived in that old apartment where she saw like the little boy, that she couldn't get pregnant and she never got her period. But then as soon as she moved out, she got her period. Like, our bodies know when something's not right, okay? I just don't think that's a coincidence. Maybe that little boy didn't want a baby in his apartment. I don't know. But nonetheless, I'm glad you moved out and got your period. In 1966, in a small town in South Africa, there were 2 cousins. One day, the family all got together, and the 2 cousins decided they wanted to go for a swim at the local pool. One of the moms said that was fine, but that one of the cousins' older brother had to go with them. The brother didn't want to, so he decided he was going to go hunt birds instead. The 2 cousins went to the pool anyway, and when they were walking back home, they met 2 guys that offered them a ride home. One of the cousins agreed, but the other one wasn't very happy about it. They got in the car anyway, but the 2 guys didn't drive the girls home. They drove them to a random building where they essayed and pew-pewed them and used their blood to draw on the walls. Later on, the brother showed up at home and asked his mom where the girls were. The mom obviously didn't know where they were since she thought they were with him, so they started looking for the girls. They ended up searching that random building where they found one of the girls in a locker and the other one was lying on the floor. At the funeral, the brother promised his mother that he'd find out who did this. That story is so freaking sad. And I actually looked up the story and they made like a whole TV show about it, I think. I don't know, but that story is so freaking sad.
There are these desert highways that go 60, 70 miles without you ever seeing a single person, a house, a gas station. They are so remote and isolated that they are terrifying to drive. And there are people who claim to see these entities on the side of the road. They call them the Watchers, the Night Watchers, the Night Stalkers. Some people call them stickmen. The Native Americans called them stick Indians. Now, there was this trucker named Lamont. Lamont was driving from California to Oklahoma. And he did not like truck stops. He did not like to stay at truck stops. And so he would always take these back roads, these scenic routes, so that he could pull off onto like a dirt road and sleep in the back of his camper at night. Well, he found himself on this one particular stretch of highway in Arizona where it was just completely open desert. And there was nothing around except cactuses and small bushes. As he's driving down this road, it is approaching twilight. The sun is starting to go down, the sky is red, and he had maybe about 40 to 50 miles to the nearest town. Well, he started to notice something off in the distance up on the highway. And he said it was over to the right, just standing there, and it looked like some kind of large cactus. As the truck got a little closer, he started to realize it had the shape of a very skinny, tall person. And it looked like a stick figure, is how he described it. He gets within about 20 to 30 feet of this thing. And he could see that this thing is like 9 feet, 10 feet tall. It is huge, but it doesn't have any shape or form really. It is just like a giant stick person. And he's so distracted and focused on this that he accidentally crashes his truck. And the back of the truck fishtails off the road, and he finds himself turned around in the middle of this desert road. So he manages to back the truck and get it straightened out, and he pulls off to the side of the road. At this point in time, he notices whatever this figure or thing was, it was gone. He figures, I better inspect the truck, make sure that I didn't do any damage. So he gets out of the truck, and he goes around to the trailer. And as he's looking on the passenger side wheels, he hears the rattle of wind hitting these like shrubs. So he turns around, and off in the distance, there is the stick figure thing again. It is just standing there. It isn't moving, and it looked like a giant stick person. So he's like, I need to get this done and get back in my truck. So he starts inspecting the wheels again. This time when he turns around, it is now closer to him. And as he moves a little further and he turns around again, it is now even closer. And by the time he gets to the passenger side door, this thing is right up on him. And he can see this thing is 9 foot tall. So he jumps in the truck, he starts it up, and he starts driving off. As he's driving down the highway, he gets maybe a mile away from where he sees this thing. And he sees it again on the side of the road. And then a couple miles later, he sees it again. And this thing just kept disappearing and reappearing on the same spot on the right side of the highway. And all the way until he reached this town, which was 40 miles away, this thing continued to follow him. Finally, he gets into this small little town, which is on a reservation, and he pulls into the small gas station. He gets out of his truck and he goes in and he grabs a coffee. And the Native American man who is behind the counter says, you look stressed, is everything okay? He goes, you're not going to believe me, but, I just had this experience with something that looked like a stick figure. And the Native American man said, oh, yeah, I know. He said, my people, we talk about this all the time, but it's called, a stick Indian. And, we believed that in older times, our ancestors, they would ride horses and they would see these things out in the desert, and sometimes they would chase them, sometimes they were just protectors or watching over the land. And so he said after that, even though he did not like rest stops or truck stops, he chose to only stay at truck stops and stay on the interstate.
This story is so weird because honestly, how do you explain this? So this man was driving home on a stormy day. He said he sees the side road that leads up to the local golf course, and it's been blocked off with flashing barricades. He said he also noticed that there was a Mercedes past the barricades with its hazard lights on. So, side note, this person is an EMT, and he decided he's going to park the car and get out and walk up to make sure that everything's okay. First, he approaches the back window and he shines a light in, and he sees that there is a person in the back slumped over, looking like they are asleep. So he's thinking he's got a few drunks on his hands. So now he moves up to the driver's side window, knocks on the glass, and shines his light inside. And what he sees is really unsettling. He said there sits the driver, bolt upright, staring straight ahead. And the knocking and the shining the light in on them did not cause them to flinch, move, blink, nothing. And then he looks across to the passenger, and it just keeps getting weirder. The passenger is slumped over and leaning on the dash. So he says this is beginning to creep him out, so he calls down to the sheriff's station and calls in a code 2, which just means no lights, no sirens, just send someone up to come and help him scope out the situation. He also says he tries to open the doors, they're all locked. So while he's still on the phone, he turns around to go back to his vehicle to go get his go bag. He's on with dispatch, and they ask him, can you please get a license plate number from the vehicle? Just as they asked him to get the license plate number, he turns around to see a big power company's cherry picker vehicle coming down from that blocked off road. And he kind of moves around it to try to get a view of the license plate number, and the car is now gone. So he flags down this cherry picker and he speaks to the driver, and the driver said that there was an 80-foot tree down across that road. He also said there's no way that that road is going to be open for at least a day or so. And then he goes, so the question is, where the heck did that car go? Remember, there is an 80-foot tree on the one side and the lit up barricades on the other. And seconds since he saw this vehicle last, it is just gone. This EMT says he is kind of unsettled now anytime he goes on to a new job and approaches a hazardous accident. Where the heck did the car go, guys? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're new here, don't forget to follow for more creepy story time.
Weird Spooky Fresno. There's a creature that doesn't run, doesn't crawl, and doesn't even have arms at all. Yet it's been caught on camera multiple times in multiple places. First footage surfaced in California. Security camera video, late at night, no sound, no context. Just a pale, thin figure, moving in a way no human should. People didn't know what to call it at first, but eventually it got a name. The Fresno nightcrawler. Witnesses describe it as tall, unnaturally slender, and moving without arms. Almost like walking pants. It doesn't sprint, it doesn't chase, it just moves. Quietly, purposefully. Then something strange happened. Another video appeared, but this time in Yosemite National Forest. And again, security footage. One larger, one smaller. In this footage, you can clearly see their feet. You can also see what looks like webbing, stretching from the knees up to the body. Then reports started coming in from far outside of California. A man in Poland claimed that he saw and filmed something nearly identical. The footage is shaky and brief, but the shape is unmistakable. If you look in this corner right here, it looks like something moving. Years later in Billings, Montana, a man said that he caught one crossing his yard. I couldn't find that security footage, unfortunately, but everyone said it was the same movement in the same silhouette. And then there's Ohio. Some believe that the nightcrawler is actually connected to a creature in Ohio called the Carmel Area Creature, a tall, pale, armless figure seen crossing roads and entering the woods. One witness described it as being over 7 feet tall. No one knows what the Fresno nightcrawler is. A cryptid, an interdimensional being, maybe something we aren't supposed to notice. But one thing is certain, it doesn't seem to hide, because it walks right through the frame. Let me know in the comments if you've ever heard of a nightcrawler, seen a nightcrawler, or what you guys think this is.
The year might be new, but we're still back with the old ways of telling Trini Paranormal, Trini Scary Stories, and Trini Folklore. And I have one for you today. It's in my DMs, and I'm going to read it to you, and it's very scary. So, our follower said, "Hi, I would like to say that I love the stories and folklore that you share. And I hope you decide to share my story anonymous." So, our person is anonymous. "So, I was told a story by my grandmother about her father. They grew up in South Trinidad, very poor. And her dad used to read the Ramayana. It's a Hindu text. She said he was a very powerful person and he could do things that were deemed impossible. She said if there was a fruit in the tree that he could not reach, he would recite an incantation and the branches would bend towards him so he could pick the fruit. She also said that he would pick leaves, recite another incantation, and use these leaves as money to buy foodstuff from the near parlor. Before he died, he gave her something. A black book. This book is invisible to everyone and only by reciting an incantation would the book then appear. I was about 10 or 11 when I first saw the book. She called me and my sister and said, 'Let me show you something.' And she held her hands in an open position in front of her and started chanting, and from nowhere a black book appeared in her hands. She allowed us to look at the book. Before I say what I remember when I saw the book, I just want to let you know that I am not telling you lies. I am not bullshitting you. I remember 3 things. Images of a hollowed earth with a sun in the center, reading about mind control, and lizard-looking people that look like us humans that live in the center of the earth. I know it sounds crazy, but you seem like a right person to share the story with." So the black book. I have heard so many variations of this story with the black book. I've heard that you don't just get a black book, it's passed down to you. I've also heard that with the black book, it teaches you how to shape shift into like a lagahu. It teaches you how to mind control people. It helps do good and do bad. Depends on what you use the incantations for. But it really shows you a very different spiritual side of things. But let me know, have you all ever heard about the black book? Have you all ever seen the black book? And do you have any experiences with a black book? And since it's the new year, you all let me know what you all want to hear for this year moving forward. I tried to manifest a TV show. So you know what? Or like you see me every Friday or something, telling like really cool Trinidadian paranormal and folklore stories. So, send all the good vibes this way and live into a little TV show or something new and fun for this channel.
I think every woman who is a real estate agent ever or is in the real estate industry in any way, shape, or form should listen to this case. This is also one of Canada's most disturbing unsolved cases. You may have heard about it, but it's one that definitely keeps me up at night. Lindsay Buziak was the firstborn daughter to her parents, Jeff and Evelyn. Eventually, her parents made her an older sister when they welcomed their second baby, a baby girl they named Sarah, into the world. Lindsay's father, Jeff, was a local real estate agent, and as she was growing up, it became evident that Lindsay wanted to follow in her dad's footsteps and go into the same industry. Her parents divorced when Lindsay was still little, but their family of 4 managed to remain very, very close. Above anything else, all 4 of them held a lot of love and respect for one another. So her entire life, pretty much, Lindsay had a very people person personality. She had the ability to make friends with anyone. She was very warm and welcoming and also a very driven person. She started working when she was only 14 years old, but it was in her early 20s that she began her real estate career in Victoria in British Columbia. And like I said, she was an outgoing person, extremely easy to talk to, also very skilled and knowledgeable. On top of that, her dad was successful in the industry industry, so Lindsay's future in real estate looked bright. It looked hopeful. She was 22 years old when she got her real estate license, and I want to say that it was within the first year that she managed to reach $3.2 million in volume. So it was very clear that this career path she was going into wasn't only going to be one that she really enjoyed, but it also quickly proved to be one that Lindsay would be very good at. Around 2005, Lindsay got into a relationship with a man called Jason Zylo. Jason was a mortgage broker, and his mom was also in the real estate industry. She worked herself as a successful agent. The Zylo family was a pretty well-known family in the area for being wealthy and successful in the industry, which was so cool for Lindsay because not only was she falling head over heels over this guy, but she also really enjoyed his family and she really respected him and his family's work ethic. And it was really nice because Lindsay could go to either him or his mom Shirley with any questions regarding real estate. By 2007, all was good in her life. Lindsay and Jason were living together in a condo. Work was good, her friends were good, social life was good, love life great. At least that's what people thought. However, towards the end of the year, Lindsay confided in her father and in some of her closest friends that her relationship with Jason was not as good as it seemed. Not because there were really any dangerously alarming red flags, but more so because their personalities just weren't meshing. They weren't getting along. It almost felt like there was something missing. But by 2008, Lindsay was putting a lot of effort in to rekindle their spark and kind of make the relationship fun and exciting again. In late January of 2008, Lindsay Buziak received a phone call. On the phone was a couple and they had an accent. Lindsay later told one of her friends that it sounded like a Spanish or Mexican accent, but she couldn't really make out where the accent was from. She just knew that they were foreign. And on said call, the woman on the phone said that her and her husband were looking urgently to buy a home within the budget of $1 million. The woman said that she was interested in one specific house in the area and she was hoping that Lindsay could make the time to schedule a showing. She said they were on a tight timeline because they just had been relocated for work and they needed to find a place to live ASAP. Lindsay was very eager about the call, obviously, being a newer agent in the industry and having the possibility to be able to sell a house for $1 million. It was huge. But there was just something about the phone call that still left Lindsay feeling a little bit uneasy. First of all, when she asked the woman how she got her phone number in the first place, the woman said that she was referred to her by a friend. Though Lindsay asked the people around her, the people that she had in work and just in her personal life, if anyone knew anything about this mystery lady, this mystery foreign couple, but nobody did. But that was fine. The excitement of it all was still enough for her to want to move forward with the couple as new clients in hopes of finding them their dream home. Lindsay told both her father and her boyfriend about the phone call and she told them that she had agreed to show them the property the next day. On Saturday, February 2nd of 2008, the plan was that she would go show them a house at 5:30 p.m. and afterwards she was going to go to a bachelorette party, meet up with her friends. But because she had never met the clients in person, didn't really know who they were, she was still feeling cautious about the entire thing. And they decided that Jason, her boyfriend, would also go with Lindsay to the showing. So the showing was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. Around 3 p.m. just before, Lindsay went up with Jason. They had lunch together. They got done with lunch around 4:30 p.m. Afterwards, Lindsay went back to their condo to change before the showing and Jason stopped by a car shop where he met up with a friend. The plan was that he was going to drive to the house that Lindsay was showing to make sure that she was good. He was going to wait outside in his car while Lindsay was doing the walkthrough with the potential buyers, and then afterwards Jason would go to a hockey game with the one friend that he met up with. Cool. So when his friend meets up with him at the car shop, he gets in Jason's car and together they drive over to the house to check on Lindsay, make sure that she's fine. They got there a few minutes after the showing started, around 5:40 p.m. Right before the showing started, Lindsay and Jason had been on the phone, but she hung up saying, "Oh, I have to go, they just got here." Witnesses later stated that the couple showed up to the house kind of out of nowhere. They just kind of appeared because it seemed like they just showed up on foot. There was no car parked anywhere. They seemingly did not arrive in a vehicle. They had literally just emerged out of nowhere. But when they met outside, everything looked normal according to the witnesses that saw them. When Jason got there, he remembers seeing a figure of a person through the glass of the house, so he assumed that the showing had already started and that they were all inside. So all three of them, Lindsay, the husband, and the wife. Jason sat outside waiting for around 10 minutes. Then he moved his car to a different area, parked a little bit further away, still closed, but he didn't want to be overbearing with Lindsay. He didn't want to be in the way. So 10 minutes after that, he texted Lindsay to see how it was going. Now it's been around 20 minutes that he's been outside, but he does not get a response. He called her, she didn't answer, so him and his friend decide to get out of the car, walk up to the house to see what was going on. They approach the front door, but it's locked, which is really weird because there should have been absolutely no reason at all as to why the front door would have been locked, and nobody was coming to the door even after they were knocking and ringing the doorbell. So they peek through the window, and then Jason sees Lindsay's shoes on the ground, but no movement in the house. So at 6:05 p.m., Jason calls 911. He fills them in, tells them the situation, tells them that Lindsay was concerned because she had not met the clients in person, because they were from out of town, etc., etc. While he's on the phone with 911, his friend is walking around the back side of the house looking for a different entrance in the house, and he sees the backyard. The door into the backyard was wide open, so he calls for Jason. Jason tells the operator on the line that they found a way in and that they're walking in right before he ends the phone call. His friend walks in through the back, walked inside of the house into the front door, and unlocked the front door to let Jason in. Both of them them are now inside of the house. It's completely silent. They separate to go look for Lindsay. His friend walks downstairs while Jason walks upstairs, and then he sees the master bedroom. He makes his way inside and he finds his girlfriend Lindsay. She was deceased, her body lying in a pool of her own blood. He yelled out to his friend to call 911, which he did. They were frantic when authorities arrived and met them upstairs in the master bedroom, where soon after, Lindsay Buziak would be pronounced deceased. Some reports state that Lindsay had well over 40 separate injuries from a sharp weapon, yet she had no defensive wounds, indicating that the struggle happened out of nowhere, that she was probably approached from the back when she wasn't looking because she had no time to defend herself. It's also believed that she was ambushed within minutes of the showing started, and it's believed that the entire thing happened in only 3 minutes. The house was taped off as a crime scene and the investigation began right then and there. Investigators taped off different areas inside the house while also walking around collecting evidence. Jason and his friend were taken to the station for questioning, but then they were released and ruled out as suspects. Because of the timing, it's believed that everything that happened would have been taking place at the exact same times that Jason and his friend were driving into the cul-de-sac. The timing just didn't really make sense as to how Jason could have done anything, given that he did not arrive until 5:40 when Lindsay was already inside with the clients in the house. But Jason was not the only one out of his family members that would be questioned, because his mother Shirley would be questioned as well. Shirley was apparently very good friends with the developer that built the houses on that specific cul-de-sac. Shirley had also apparently been over at Jason and Lindsay's condo the night before, where Lindsay was telling her all about the showing. Apparently Shirley had offered to do the showing for her after Lindsay had expressed that she was feeling a little bit nervous because she didn't know the clients. But she turned down her offer because it was something that Lindsay wanted to do for herself, and she wanted to work hard and be able to earn that commission on her own. Point being, Shirley was also contacted by the authorities to get more information to see if she had any information or knew anything that could help move the investigation along. But eventually, she too was ruled out as a suspect after providing an alibi. I don't know how solid her alibi was, and a lot of people do suspect that Shirley did have something to do with this, but she provided an alibi. Lindsay's passing was so devastating and so confusing because it felt so random yet so targeted at the same time. The next step in the investigation obviously was trying to figure out who this mystery couple was that Lindsay had met up with, because obviously there was more than enough reason to assume that they were the people responsible for doing this to Lindsay. And because there were no fingerprints, no DNA, or really any other physical pieces of evidence left behind in the house, officers had reason to believe that the people who did this knew what they were doing and had done it before, because it felt so well organized and it happened so fast, but nobody could figure out who the husband and the wife, the mystery people, were. Witnesses who saw Lindsay that day standing outside of the house with the man and the woman gave a description of what they looked like to authorities. A witness stating that the woman looked to be white, around the age of 35 to 45, with short blonde hair and wearing a fancy dress. The man was also described as white, around 6 foot, with dark hair and wearing a brown jacket. Investigators turned their attention to the phone, and they found that it was a burner phone that had been used to make that phone call to Lindsay when that woman called. That burner phone had been purchased in Vancouver months prior and had never been turned on or used until she made the phone call to Lindsay. And the phone was activated under the name Paulo Rodriguez, a name that police believed to be completely fake, a made-up person. It was registered to a real business address in Vancouver, but investigators don't think that the business had anything to do with it. They believe that whoever bought the phone likely just picked a real, legitimate address to use, but it had no connection. They looked at the cell phone pings from the phone, and they were able to track down the phone's movements, showing that the phone traveled on the ferry from Vancouver to Victoria the day before Lindsay's death. And almost immediately after, the phone was deactivated and never used again. Police believe that this phone was purchased for the sole reason of luring Lindsay in, only adding to their assumption that this had been planned and meticulously organized. Meanwhile, Jason is still working with the authorities, even doing a reenactment with them, showing them exactly where he was, exactly how he walked in, where he was standing, and every movement of his leading up to him entering the master bedroom and finding Lindsay's body. And the investigation continued. Investigators questioned over 1,500 different people, conducted over 30 search warrants, and went down the list of 2,000 different possible person of interest. But when the days turned into weeks, and then into months, and then into years, Lindsay's family was left feeling hopeless, and it felt like the case was slowly going cold. Later that same year, in 2008, something very strange happened. In the middle of the night, Nikki, one of Lindsay's closest friends, was woken up by a phone call from an unknown number. She couldn't remember much of what the woman actually said on the phone call, but the one thing that she noticed was that she had a foreign accent, and her stomach immediately sank, remembering that Lindsay got a phone call from a woman with an accent from an unknown number. Like many people, Nikki believed that the mysterious client, who was a woman with an accent, was the person responsible for ending Lindsay's life. And Nikki was scared, but she wanted to figure out, one, who had called her, and two, how they got her number. She called back the number over and over and over again, 20 times, 30 times, until someone finally picked up. The woman on the phone was Shirley Zalo, Jason's mother. Shirley and Nikki did not know each other, so Nikki is completely thrown off and confused, and she asks why she she called and how she got her number. And Shirley's explanation to that was that she too was confused. She claimed that she had been trying to call her secretary, who also happened to be named Nikki, and she had no idea how this Nikki's phone ended up in her phone. Very strange, very confusing. Since her passing in 2008, there's been zero updates really. A lot of people believe that what happened to Lindsay was targeted and that it was organized by someone closest to her, but to this day, the case remains unsolved. And what do we always say when a case is unsolved? Somebody knows something. Like, there isn't another option. Like, it wasn't an accident. There's no question. Someone did this to Lindsay. I don't know. It keeps me up at night, and I feel terribly for Lindsay's family because they have no justice. I mean, how do you find closure in that? Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on this. Let me know if you have heard about this before. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Lindsay's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
I used to do house calls in the hills of the Appalachian Mountains, sometimes in areas that were so desolate where people wouldn't have running water or electricity. People were in areas where I didn't have cell service or my GPS wouldn't work, so I'd be navigating to their homes with the use of a compass in my car and a map. And one of the most frequently asked questions I get about this experience is, weren't you scared to go into strangers' homes? Now, I work in the city for a different company now, and my answer to that question is, sometimes I get a little nervous. But you have to remember, you can't judge every home you're going into by 1 or 2 or 3 bad experiences. These people are having us come into their homes for a reason, and it's a very vulnerable position to have a stranger come into your home. In addition, I am not a small woman, right? And I might not be able to outrun a lot of people, but they're not going to be able to pick me up and run with me. I am past the point of people picking up and running off with me. So whatever you're going to do to me, we're gonna do here. Like, you're not easily shoving me into a car, shoving me into a trunk. I ain't fitting in those small spaces. For the company I work for now in the city, because I do have self-service most of the time, I have a panic button, and I've had to use it a couple of times. Some of these areas are still kind of hard to get to, and one time I was in the home and hit the panic button, and they did not get to me in time because of the nature of the situation. Knock it off. I am so tired of it. This woman, this entity, spirit, whatever in my house, is just driving me nuts. I unplugged my Christmas lights the other day because we were going out of town and I didn't want them to get hot and start a fire or whatever. And we left. We come home. All of the Christmas lights are plugged back in. Like they're having a festive time. I don't even remember what I was talking about anymore.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeymen.
Have you seen them graves with a metal cage? During the Victorian era, these graves began popping up around England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland. Essentially, they were a metal cage that was placed over the gravesite and secured into the ground. Local folklore believed that these cages were installed to prevent the dead from turning into zombies and digging their way out the graves and terrorising the streets. But I think the real reason is actually more scary. Medical students were legally allowed to dissect the bodies of criminals who were executed in the gallows. But the demand for these bodies got so high that the medical students then started to arrange for recently buried people to be dug back up, which is disgusting. So to prevent this happening to people's loved ones, families began constructing these cage-like structures and building them around their graves. These iron cages were very popular between the 18th and the 19th century. And the most common place to find these graves is Scotland.
As someone actively planning a trip to Australia, this story makes me not want to go anymore. Today I'm going to tell you guys about one of the most notorious serial killers ever from Australia, and this is a very scary guy who targeted tourists and people traveling there. Australia's already scary enough with all of the different dangerous animals and venomous snakes and spiders and all these other things, but now we're talking about serial killers there too. Australia has nowhere near as many as America, so really it shouldn't be that scary, but this person was absolutely terrifying. So I'm just going to get right into the story. And so today I'm going to tell you guys about the backpacker killer. And so it all starts kind of in the late 1980s and the early 1990s.
multiple different people going backpacking throughout Australia, mostly in the Belanglo State forest area, were disappearing. First was a 19-year-old couple named Deborah Everest and James Gibson, and they went missing on December 30th of 1989 after leaving Sydney, and then once they left Sydney, they were never seen again. And then 21-year-old Simone Schmidl, who was from Germany, she was traveling and visiting, and she went missing on January 20th, 2 years later, so in 1991. She had also left Sydney and was headed for Melbourne, and they went missing in the same area. And another German couple also went missing, and I apologize in advance, I definitely do not pronounce their names right. I tried to Google it, I listened to a video, but I've practiced. I don't think I'm going to pronounce their names right, but their names were Gabor Neugbauer, who was 21, and Anya Habschied, who was 20, and they disappeared on December 26th of 1991 after leaving a hostel called King's Cross. The following year, on April 18th of 1992, 2 British backpackers also disappeared, and they were also last seen at King's Cross Hostel. Their names were Caroline Clark, who was 21, and Joanne Walters, who was 22, and they were friends and roommates who had been traveling together, and they went missing. 5 months after Caroline and Joanne disappeared, on September 19th, 2 people were running in the Belanglo area when they found a body that was partially hidden. They called the police, and the next day the police also find a second body in the area, and after sending the bodies off for testing with dental records, they discovered that they are in fact Caroline Clark and Joanne Walters. Joanne had been stabbed 15 times, including in the back and the head, and some of these stab wounds would have paralyzed her before killing her, so it's really clear that whoever did this wanted her to suffer. Caroline was shot 10 times in the head, and after the investigation, authorities thought that once she was killed, the killer kept shooting her in the head. They say that the killer used her for target practice, which is just beyond horrifying. All of this killing is just horrible, but the fact that he just used her as a thing to practice on is terrible. It just adds to a level of evil that this person is. On October 5th of the following year, another body was found in a remote area in Belanglo. The police ended up finding 2 bodies in this area. They were ID'd as Deborah Everest and James Gibson, who is the first couple to have been known to go missing in connection to this killer. James's body had 8 stab wounds, including 1 to his upper spine. Again, this probably would have paralyzed him. And so now they're this was definitely intentionally done. Him paralyzing his victims before killing them was definitely on purpose to add to their torture. And Deborah was beaten absolutely horrifically and horrendously. It was such a level of violence and anger. Her skull was fractured multiple times. Her jaw was broken. She had been stabbed and wounded with a knife. And it was just a level of violence that you can't even comprehend. What was weird to the police though, they weren't expecting to find James's body anywhere close to that. So they thought he was going to be way more north because they found his camera and his backpack that he had when he went missing over 75 miles north of where their bodies were discovered. And so they thought for sure he was north. Maybe he got lost, maybe something happened, maybe he was robbed, there was something that happened up north. But now they think that he was killed in the area, and then whoever killed them took his stuff and dumped it somewhere else to try to throw off police because they thought that their bodies would never be found in this remote area. On November 1st, so just a little while later, another skeleton was found in the same area along a trail. The victim had at least 8 stab wounds, and again, some were to the spine, and they were to impair her. It took a little bit to ID her, but they realized that this was Simone Schmidl. And what was weird was the clothing that was found with her body was not actually hers. It was clothing to another missing person, Anya Habschied. And they're okay, so Anya and Gabor are also connected to this as well. And so Anya and Gabor had not been found at this point, but they obviously are going to search the surrounding area, and 3 days later, they do find their bodies. Anya had been completely decapitated, and actually to this day, her skull has never been found. And Gabor had been shot in the head 6 individual times, and it was very clear to the ME that they had suffered and been tortured for quite a while before dying, which is the pattern with all of the victims. It's very clear to police that there is a serial killer. He's dubbed the backpacker killer in the media. Police ended up creating a profile of the killer, and they made a huge task force to try to find this killer. This was taken very seriously. They wanted to know who was doing this to all of these people. They're young people just trying to travel the world and explore, and they wind up tormented and killed, and that's horrific. And so they make a task force. They come up with a list of over 230 potential suspects that they think could have done this, but using some different information, witnesses, and some other technology that they had, I don't fully understand exactly how they did it, they narrowed down the list to 32 potential people. And the person that we find out is the killer was on that list. But at the time that they narrowed down this list, they weren't sure if they were looking for one serial killer or multiple. They were thinking maybe there's 2 or 3 because they're kidnapping and harming like multiple people at once in multiple of these cases, and that's pretty hard to do as just one person. On November 13th of 1993, though, a man named Paul Onions from the UK calls the police, and he says that he has information about the case. He says that a few years back, on January 25th of 1990, when Paul was only 21 years old, so very similar age to all the other victims, he was backpacking in Australia and hitchhiking, and he said he was picked up by a guy who called himself Bill, and that's the only information he had on his name. He only drove a little ways towards Belanglo before pulling out a revolver and some rope and saying that he was going to rob Paul, and he attacks Paul. However, Paul was able to get out, he started to run, and Bill starts shooting at him. Fortunately, Paul was able to flag down another motorist. They help him out, and they both describe the car and the assailant to the police. At the time that Paul was attacked, they weren't able to figure out who did this, and it went unsolved. Paul went back to the UK. He's obviously traumatized, and when he hears about this case years later, he's like, I bet that's the same guy who attacked me. They are able to connect Paul's attack to the backpacker killer, and eventually they're able to identify Bill as Ivan Milat. And they decide to look into Ivan's past, and he was one of the 32 people that was on the list that they had narrowed down. He fit the profile to a T, and they learn a lot about him. They learn he was born December 27th in 1944, so he's about 50 years old now as they're investigating. He had a lot of issues growing up. His dad had a temper. He was an alcoholic. There were 10 boys in the family, and pretty much all of them were known by the local police for a bunch of different issues, including weapons and violence and just a whole bunch of stuff. But all of his siblings remember Ivan being even worse. He was antisocial, he was psychopathic, he was attacking animals with machetes as early as 13 years old, he was robbing places and getting arrested and sent to juvie when he was only 17 and 18, and so just an extra level that none of the other kids ever achieved, and it seems like he was just an extra level of psychopathic. And so they're thinking it's pretty clear that they're looking at the right guy, and they decide to start surveilling him. They also get a positive ID from Paul Onions. Ivan is his attacker. And so now they're able to arrest him for Paul's attack. And they go to his house, and since they know he's dangerous and they are worried that he has quite a few weapons or that he might try to flee, they have as many as 50 police officers surround his house. And so they know that they are getting this man 100%. After they're able to detain him, they search the house and they find multiple weapons, including some that definitely match the crimes that I've previously mentioned. And then they also find multiple items belonging to the victims. And they realize not only did Ivan have different items belonging to the victims, but his mom and multiple of his siblings had been carrying around victims' items for quite some time. And so now the police are like, is the whole family involved in this? Or did they not know that Ivan was gifting them dead people's items, and they just thought these were brand new gifts that he was giving them? In the end, Ivan was charged for Paul's attack and eventually all 7 of the backpacker murders, and he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for every single murder. In 2019, he ended up dying from stomach cancer at age 74 while being incarcerated. And you would think that this is where the story would end, that he was a horrible person, he attacked at least 1 and killed at least 7 people. But over the years, the task force continued to look into all the different people who were young and disappeared from the area, and they realized that they think that he could have killed so many more people, upwards of 50 plus people. And his name, as well as the title of the backpacker killer, created quite a bit of fear and terror in Australia. Obviously, they still do to this day.